Themes, Mark Lawson talks to one of television's most inventive and irrepressible writers, Russell T Davies.
If you mention the name of most television dramatists to viewers, they'd say Who. But even before he made the name Doctor Who famous to a new generation, as producer and main author of the revived sci-fi series, Russell T Davies was making an unusual name for himself. Queer as Folk was a landmark in TV's depiction of sexuality, and he confirmed his originality with the end-of-the-world drama The Second Coming and the Welsh comedy Mine All Mine. There are other writers with power in modern television, but only Russell T Davies can summon you to his Cardiff studios and casually say, "Meet me in the TARDIS." According to a national newspaper, you're the 15th most powerful man in British broadcasting. Is that how it feels to you?
No, I don't wake up thinking, how do I murder 14 people now? That list will be published next year and I'll be gone. And it'll be full of new media people and things like that. It's nice. I think it's a nice recognition of all the stuff we do here in Cardiff. But it means nothing. I think if I go in to commission, to pitch a new programme at BBC or ITV, they'll just sit there saying, is it any good? I really don't think people sit there going, oh, it's written by Russell T Davies, we must make it. It'd be nice if they did, and maybe they should.
Although you've ended up with an unusual amount of power for a writer. This whole vast empire around us, you've got Doctor Who, Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, and you're presiding over it all as executive producer. That doesn't normally happen to writers.
No, well, it should. It's that sort of American showrunner position where you don't just write the script, but you oversee it. You employ brilliant people, but I think so much drama goes wrong because you need to fix the tone, you need to establish what the drama is, and every person who reads a script has a different version of the script in their heads, and so it needs someone, which is the producer as well, and the whole production team, but it needs streamlining, it needs to say, what is this drama, what is it about, and the showrunner does that. I think the more you can get writers out of their attics and onto the sets and actually making the stuff and having power in it, then I think the better a product gets, but it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard process to do. Partly because a lot of writers like living in their attic and just throwing a script at you and then going back to smoking their pipe.
Well, they'd end up with your own TARDIS. I mean, it's better than an attic, isn't it?
My front room's looking rather good, isn't it? See the bedroom.
In another national newspaper list, you're 14 places higher. You're the #1 most influential gay man in Britain.
That's more like it.
To another poll.
Yeah.
Is that an accolade you welcome?
Not at all. It's just mad, these lists. It's like you sit at home and someone phones up and says, have you seen this list? You're on it. And it's like, it's nothing to do with you at all. And you laugh for 5 minutes and they printed a terrible photo of me, and that was far more important to me. I think if you're a 15-year-old gay boy sitting there in school and you might feel very alone and wonder what you're going to do with your life, I think when gay people are visible in whatever media, I don't just mean telly, I mean law or sport, all these spheres, then I just think, I hate saying the word role model, but it's just visibility. It's like you sort of think, I can do that. I don't have to sit here and be on my own and suffer. It's like anyone can do these jobs. They're available to straight people and gay people alike.
A lot of people, who would surprise some, I think, who work in television don't actually like television, and they'd rather be in the movies, they'd rather be in the theatre.
Very true.
You've always struck me as someone who absolutely believes in TV, who loves it.
Yes, I do, in all its forms, and I think it drives me mad the way it's thought of as, people every week, so many people in telly still sort of say, oh, you switch your brain off and watch a bit of TV. When did that happen? It's rubbish, that statement. It's that, and I don't mean you have to sit down and watch the latest Polyarkov to engage your brain. I can have fascinating conversations with the television while I'm watching the dumbest quiz show or the fun of this morning or stuff like that, and the big proper dramas and stuff like that. I think people talk about interactive television, and I always sit there thinking it's so interactive already. I've been talking at that screen for years, and it does send you spiralling into thinking about all sorts of things. I genuinely love it, and I love all areas of it. It's like there's nothing I don't watch, really, and I think it's really hard to say you love television, actually. It's taken as a slightly embarrassing thing. It's easy to stand up and say, I love opera, I love theatre, I love film. And people go, oh, quite right too, aren't you marvellous like that? If you stand up and say, I love telly, you sound trivial and you sound superficial. And I'm not. And I'm clever and I know what I'm talking about. And I think it's monstrously unsung, as as a medium and as an art form.
But it's a particularly bad time for TV. The medium has had to apologise to the Queen, has had to apologise to the public on many occasions. Fraudulent phone-ins, fake competitions, falsely edited documentaries, BBC short of money and making job cuts. Is television in crisis?
No, I don't think so at all. There are faults, but it's far more... It's so hard to have an intelligent debate about this stuff anyway. It's like, especially the phone line stuff, there are faults, but it's much more interesting than fraud. It's much more fascinating how endemic that became and how everyone knew, viewers and program makers alike, were complicit in what happened. It's a fascinating process of what happened. It's like we knew. I knew what was going on with those phone lines. I think a lot of people phoning in knew.
Did you, though? Because you see, most people now say if we'd had any idea that we weren't voting
But they do.
properly,
I think there's a very sophisticated level on which people watch television. They're watching a live show and they're sitting there going, that's not live. And then, they're part of the game. And you can still imagine that you can phone in. I mean, there was fraud then when they were claiming to be live. But you think, well, the phone line is still active. You can still enter a competition, even on a pre-recorded show, which sometimes is possible. It's very complicated. It's not as simple as sort of saying television evil, viewers stupid. But the whole situation is very mixed up and woven into where television's heading and where it's going. So these simple headlines of bad people, and I think simple headlines that are being written within the BBC as well is shameful at the moment. Actually, I think the way we're dealing with it is as bad as the problem itself.
Well, within the BBC, staff are being sent on a course to tell them how to tell the truth.
Am I going
You may get the email.
I'd love it. It's like, but there's no... Oh, you can't even talk about this stuff as though it's real, as though it's a genuine workplace problem. It's like you take the moral high ground, you take the moral low ground. It's like, frankly, I think if you look at like a researcher on Blue Peter who makes a mistake on a live transmission, I think what they did was very, very clever. You're not allowed to say that. That's like a forbidden sentence. It's like they were brilliant. If you've ever worked on a live show, that's hard work. It's pure adrenaline, and some very quick thinking was made there. It was the wrong decision. Everyone makes the wrong decision under pressure. That's entirely allowable. But we're not allowed to say this.
So it's clever to come up with a fake guest.
Brilliant. Live, when the clock is ticking and someone is shouting in your ear, saying, we have got 5 minutes left on screen, we've got no winner, we've got nothing to fill with, there's a kid, you're the winner. Brilliant. Promote that person, I say. I'm not saying these mistakes shouldn't have happened, but the way we talk about them, like Victorian nannies, and none of these conversations actually blames the whole system, the people who set the whole structures in place. I'd also say that person on the studio floor who makes a mistake is underpaid and overworked and would probably be sitting in the office till midnight that night to get the next show ready. It's like, no wonder mistakes are made.
You've been in the medium for 20 years or so now. Looking back, is there anything...
Looking good, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just looking back.
Yeah. Is there anything you're glad there wasn't a public inquiry going on at the time? Anything you...
Oh my God, when I used to work on Why Don't You, which was a kids show about magazine show where you'd write in with recipes and ideas, I used to make them all up. And I used to go, and we were so short on material, because every single kid in the land wrote in with a recipe for chocolate Rice Krispie cakes. And if we could have filled every episode with that for 25 minutes, it would have been fine. I used to go into W.H. Smith, and of course we didn't even have a budget to buy research books. So I used to go to W.H. Smith and read the books on the shelves without buying them. Kids' books full of recipes and games and puzzles. And I'd read them, and I'd go back and I'd put them in the programme, and I'd say, this is from Wendy Wilson in Banff. So that's why I lied my way through Why Don't You for 3 years. And I do it again. It was the only way to get the programme made.
If we leave aside the scandals for a moment, there's no doubt TV has changed an incredible amount in the last few years.
Yeah.
We're at the centre, which wouldn't have been true of the old Doctor Who, we're at the centre of this vast industry, really. There are 2 spin-offs, there are websites, there are mobile phone episodes, all the rest of it. Is there a risk that the show, the script at the centre of it, gets overwhelmed by all that?
No, I don't think so, because I know that's the first danger. I mean, I'm here as the executive producer on Doctor Who, and I am a writer. It's got a writer at the heart of it. I mean, I'm fascinated by all our new media stuff and all the different platforms you go onto now, and that is the future of broadcasting, especially this sort of drama. But it's still irrelevant to me, because getting the script for every 45-minute episode is still the most important thing. And obviously, it's the thing I'm always going to be most interested in.
You've alluded to the future of TV there, some of the things that will happen. The television we grew up with, which was the box in the corner showing one programme after another, even the word television may be meaningless within a
Yeah.
few years because people will just watch on a variety of screens in their pocket, on the wall, on their computer. Does that frighten you or excite you, that?
I think it's very exciting because I think you're just in danger of sounding old if you try to be King Canute going everything's changing. It's a nightmare because it'll change beyond your control. What frightens me is that I'm 44 and the people pioneering this stuff will be 18 now and in the next 10 years will find new forms in ways that I can't imagine. I just hope I don't get left behind. Or if I do, then there's a little archive channel still making good old-fashioned dramas that last for an hour.
The test for me is whether people can bring themselves to say the word content, because our generation say program or script or film, and we're encouraged now to say content.
Product
Yeah.
as well. I said
Are you
product
happy to say
earlier, yeah.
content and product?
Do you know, it's hard. When I sit on something like Doctor Who, I'm not ashamed of those words because much as I love it, and I think Doctor Who could be as intelligent and as witty and as profound as any other drama, it is a wacky and great big science fiction entertainment show that's designed to be watched by millions of people and is designed to have merchandise and is designed to be shown all over the world. You know, you can't be that precious about it.
Going back to old-fashioned television, growing up, Swansea, 1960s, what was the television you were first aware of?
It was Doctor Who. It was Doctor Who. I can remember stuff that's gone from the archives. I remember William Hartnell regenerating into Patrick Troughton, and if you look at the lists, I was 3 years old. And I loved it. My mum always loved science fiction and fantasy material and would gravitate towards that sort of stuff. And we loved television. In our house, it was never switched off. If a visitor would come round or something, if they were allowed in, then the telly would just stay on, and it would stay on until close down in the days when it closed down. So it was, and my parents were marvellous. They never stopped me watching anything. I can remember watching, Pennies from Heaven and stuff like that, which, I mean, I must have been 13, 16, however old I was then. Remember the fuss about that, about Gemma Craven and her nipples, and newspapers were screaming, saying this is filth. And I remember sitting watching the most beautiful drama, I, Claudius, stuff like that. It was funny. You imagine, I went to this big Swansea Comprehensive, and I, Claudius was so popular. All the kids used to talk about it the next morning. You can't quite imagine that now, can you?
Hey.
Everyone talking about Roman drama and loving it, really loving it.
It's interesting you mentioned Pennies from Heaven, because Dennis Potter, long before I ever interviewed you, I assumed was an influence. I mean, you've even written the same story because he did a Casanova in
Yes.
the 1970s. But
And his religious works as well. Yeah.
Well, he did The Son of Man and you did
Yes.
Second Coming, yeah. So Dennis Potter is a clear influence on you.
Well, that's a genius. How could genius not be an influence? It's like, I don't think I'm slavish in that sense. I think if I read a script, I could see much more of Paul Abbott's rhythms and Kay Mellor's characters in there, that sort of thing. But I think what was so brilliant about watching something like Pennies from Heaven at that age was it was just an act of the imagination. It wasn't a period drama, although it was set in a bygone period, but it wasn't a crime show, even though it had a murder and a death and an execution. It was just the sheer formatlessness of it, and they burst into song.
I'm interested you were allowed to watch so much TV because in our generation, I know people who weren't allowed to watch ITV, for example, because
Yeah,
their
I know.
parents... your parents were teachers who were often quite stern about TV and despised it, but yours didn't.
No, not at all. I always think they were slightly in awe of it, actually. They thought it was a good thing and that it should be on, and there was none of that stuff about it. Yeah, there were people in school who weren't allowed to watch Magpie. They could watch Blue Peter, but they couldn't watch Magpie. And they thought Magpie was terrible because their Christmas appeal asked for money instead of bottle tops. Things like that, like what a crime. But there was absolutely none of that in my house. Just, I don't know why. I've never even asked my mum and dad, really, to be honest. It was just like, that's their approach to telly. It's still on. You go home, my dad's still sitting there, and he's blind now, but he still has the telly on. It's just automatic. It's there, burbling away.
And you ended up at Oxford reading English, so you must have been a pretty good student at school.
I was. It's a bit of a swat. Yes, actually, I wasn't even a bit of a swat. I was good. I was terrible. I had good memory. And English I loved. And I discovered that really what I loved was the novel, was the story. In other words, it takes you a long time to discover. Put me in front of a poem, and I was like a seal out of water. I was just rubbish. I didn't realise that at 18. It takes 3 years of reading Dryden and Wordsworth and everything else to realise, I just want to read the Brontes. Thank you very much. That'll do me.
And your upbringing, presumably, it was English language rather than Welsh.
Yes, I don't speak Welsh at all. All English. You learn Welsh in like the first 2 years of comprehensive, but that's it, really. I never. Shame on me.
And Mine All Mine, about a man who discovers that he may own the right to Wales. It's your most openly Welsh series. That presumably did draw on childhood memories of being in this very distinct culture.
Yes, it was nice. I sort of went and did that because I'd lived in Manchester for so long. And if I say so myself, I can rattle off Manchester dialogue now, and I love that voice. But but I really wanted to write Welsh. I think it's a policy of mine. Actually, it's an unseen nation on screen, and you get any mainstream drama will have an Irish character in it, a Scottish character. Welsh is very, very rare, and that's wrong. And I think the only thing you can do is and it's part of what we're doing here in Cardiff now with these shows, in setting Torchwood in Cardiff, is that you've just got to normalise it. The moment people get used to hearing Welsh accents, then someone else will feel free to cast a Welsh character in a show about a London detective.
But I was interested in that because some writers are very Welsh, and Dylan Thomas being about as Welsh as it's possible to be. But do you think of yourself as a Welsh writer?
Not really. No, not particularly. I mean, maybe as you get older, actually, because it is the past 5 or 6 years that I've actually... I spent like 15 years living in Manchester, and it takes you that long to sort of... And actually, I think probably actually when my mum died, actually, in 2001. I think that's when you take a bit of a turn and look at who you are. That's when I first thought of Mine All Mine, because I spent more time in Swansea and started to look at the town in a different way. I started to realise how much I like it, you know? And you probably spend your 20s and 30s running away from your childhood, saying, oh, I've moved on now, that town's too small. And as you get older, you think, oh, I'm just an idiot, that town's beautiful. And I've not particularly written about Welshness as such, and I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what I would write. And I have got friends who work in theatre here, for example, who are driven by that and fascinated by it. I don't share that. I just like hearing the voice. I just think to get that voice on telly is good.
You also wrote a very striking series, The Second Coming, which was about Christ coming back to Earth. Now, that seemed to be an agnostic series, although it had respect for the figure of Christ. But was it a religious upbringing?
Oh, no, not at all. And no, and my dad made me go to Sunday school for till I was about 7, and I gave it very early. I literally thought it was all nonsense, and I was atheist from the word go, and really very young, thinking, I just don't believe a word of this, and stopped going. And the woman from the Sunday school came to the door demanding that I'd come along. I was seen as terrible. I was a lost child. My father arguing in the doorway saying, I can't make him go. And but I wouldn't. I simply wouldn't. So, I'm passionately atheist in that sense. And I hate atheism sounding negative. The hard thing about atheism is that you define yourself in negatives. You say, I don't believe, I'm not this. And it always has the word not and no in the sentence. And I think that's rubbish. I think it's a very powerful and positive way to look at the world. And also, not the only way to look at the world. I think, when writing The Second Coming, the easiest thing in the world would have been to write a polemic. It's just trash religion. As an atheist, it was much more interesting for me to approach that with respect, to sort of try and understand that whole process, and yet ultimately debunk it in the final reel sort of thing.
I found watching your work again before this interview, going back to the very early work, Century Falls, Dark Season, obviously Doctor Who's Second Coming, the world almost ends an awful lot in your work. There is this apocalyptic strain in it, and I wondered where that came from.
That's interesting. I think partly because you can do that with drama, because it's a created world, and once you've created a world, you can end it, whereas the real world just keeps going. I think I do think everyone dies in the end. I think it's part of the point of fiction is what I love about fiction is that happy endings, sad endings, they're entirely imposed, and that's why I especially like writing happy endings actually, because I think in the real world they don't exist. There's no love story that lasts because one of them dies first. And I think when people strive towards realism in drama, and when they start defining drama as tragedy, saying if it has a sad ending, therefore it's good, and therefore that's drama, I sort of think, well, the real world does that. That takes care of it for you. If it's an artificial world that you're shaping, you can actually push it into a happy ending because life won't do it for you. Because
of Queer as Folk, an obvious question about your childhood is when you suspected or knew that you were gay. When was it?
Yes. Do you know, I've never known. It was always 11, 12. It just sort of... It grows, and it's a long time till you put the word gay on yourself. It's just liking boys, first of all. But young, certainly 10, 11, 12, it's ticking away. Probably younger, if you looked at me. If you've seen little gay 6-year-old Russell Davis running around, you go, look at that pufter. Bless him. So you're last to know in some ways. But slowly then, and sort of just grew in my head during your teens and stuff like that until you come out. You have to leave home, first of all, I mean, in those days.
When did you tell your parents?
Oh, just sort of after university, really. And when I'd grown up and when it was like they didn't know. Do you know what I mean? It's like they've watched you. You forget that when you're a teenager, they're actually watching you every hour of your life. And of course they know, and it doesn't need to go into words sometimes. And then, so no one was surprised, let's put it that way.
And according to Daffod in Little Britain, Wales is a bad place to be gay. What was that your experience?
I think, when I did move away to Manchester, it's like, I think it was very good for me because it's a big gay scene in Manchester. And that was great for me, actually. It was like, I think it is one of those things where, and this is changing, but it is, I hate using the word lonely because that's so emotive, but naturally, I think you miss out. I think 13, 14, 15, when you're having all those cider parties in school, and everyone's snogging and having sex on the coats in the bedroom and things like that, I do think there's a big gap for gay teenagers there. That's where you should be making your mistakes and breaking your heart every day and crying in the school toilets and doing all that rubbish. And that is starting to happen now for gay teenagers, which is absolutely brilliant, but just didn't happen when I was young till you reached 19, 20.
But it struck me that the early 80s, that although it was easier to come out and easier to be gay, you had the other side of it, which was AIDS, which
Yes.
at that stage absolutely disproportionately affected gay
Yeah.
men. So were you frightened?
Yes, in a really sort of, it's weird the way these things are reported at the time, in a really parochial way. I thought, well, I don't live in London, and I don't know any Americans. Because that's how it was reported then. It was, first of all, it was an American gay cancer. And because I remember, I must have been 21 years old, living in Oxford and getting a copy of Him magazine, which had the most powerful illustration on the cover by Oliver Frey of a test tube full of boiling, naked male bodies. I mean, it was more effective than any HIV advertising, anything. It was really, and the headline was like, this is real. I suppose I was just about the right time, actually, because I'd been a student, so I hadn't had much money. So I was just at that stage where I was probably just about to go mad and go on the scene and sleep with everyone you possibly could. And that warmed me off just at the right time, and to be safe.
When you left university, you went into theatre first and then TV. What was there a career plan when you left?
No, not at all. Oh, and I had no idea. I was just wandering about. And because, I mean, really, I know now, with hindsight looking back, that I wanted to be a writer. But I didn't think like that. It's like they were just like a different species, and it didn't occur to me that you actually really...
Had you written things as an adolescent?
I started writing with a marvellous youth theatre company, the West Glamorgan Youth Theatre Company, that got me writing little plays at 15, and loved it. I would be sitting as a student in school, stories, all the time, stories, just constantly. And it's hard to sort of turn around and sort of say, actually, that is you. That is you, and you can make a living out of it. That's a massive step, and it's not even one quick, big step to take. It's a slow turning and realising that you're not getting any younger, and actually that's your passion, and it's not even your passion, that's your brain. That's who you are. That, no choice, can't change it, that's you. So get on with it and make that fit into the real world, and to do that, that is to write for a living.
But if things had gone slightly differently, we could be talking to you as a former play school presenter. There was
Yes.
one outing.
Yes, I did one, because I was working in telly, and one of the producers sort of said, come and have an audition for Play School. And I was 21, I thought, what? And I needed the money. But actually I thought, what a laugh, how brilliant. So I went to do my first Play School, and I literally walked out of the studio going, never again.
Now, I think I'll give him a big smile. Hello. Because he's just scored the winning goal for his team. So there he is. Hello. I'm really happy. I've just won a match for the team.
I knew it was wrong.
What was so wrong? What was that feeling?
It was literally the wrong side of the camera. Literally, like, this is not me. And I was good. It was a perfectly good performance. And they said, right, we'll make your next booking. And I went, oh, sorry. I've absolutely changed my mind.
And at that point, when did you become Russell T Davies?
Oh, only when I hate that T. It's because when I had my first credit, I think my first credit was actually my first credit on screen was for script editor on Children's Ward, and there's another Russell Davies, the famous Russell Davies, who edited the Kenneth Williams diaries and things like that.
Radio 2 broadcaster.
Indeed, yeah. So no one made me. It's not like anyone forced you to do it, but I just thought it was sensible, and I hate it. I wish
You got sick of being asked about dance tunes from the 1920s. And that
I'd
kind
get
of
letters every week. I get letters saying, "Please, what was that record you played on Sunday?" And it's like, I do seriously, I get them, and I wonder what he gets. I'd love to know. I bet he gets some good offers. So I wish I changed it to Steve, because actually my real first name is Stephen. So I hate having that, because the moment I changed it to Russell T Davies, and it went out on screen, the next person came up to me and, oh, right, James T. Kirk. And I was like, oh, thank you. If I'd thought of that, I wouldn't have never have used it, but stuck with it.
Freud would want to know, though, why T?
Oh, I just sat there going, Russell S, Russell A, Russell... It was the only one that sounded quite nice, and it probably sounded quite nice because of James T. Kirk. That's probably built in my head somewhere, but hate it.
So the first writing you did, because I was watching something called Breakfast Serials, which were little inserts, were they?
Vignettes, weren't they? It was a 40-minute programme with 5 different dramas in it, sort of comedy sketch, a children's tale, a thriller, an adventure series, all made with the same cast. I've been so lucky in, like, it was like, there's a slot on the BBC, there's 13 weeks off you go and film it. And I wrote it and directed it, and it was balmy. There's some great stuff in there. Puppets, all sorts of nonsense like that. Freedom, absolutely. Died a death. Absolutely died a death. Twice as many people watched Top Banana on ITV than watched that. And actually, it was the beginning. I'd been in children's for a few years, and I love children's, but it was the beginning of me sort of realising that I was wrong for children's, genuinely wrong, because I wasn't that interested in the audience. And I love that children's audience, but I wasn't really writing for them. And the demographics of children were getting younger. I was happy writing for sort of 15, 16-year-olds, and that's wrong for children. You should be writing for the 8-year-olds. You should be writing for the 6-year-olds, really. And a friend of mine phoned me up and sort of said, I think if you're making jokes about the juvenilia of Emily Bronte at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, you're in the wrong job. She was right. And I took it away and I thought to myself, get out. You've got to get out.
But someone had encouraged you to write in children's television.
Well, I was encouraging myself. I was the greatest motor behind it. I mean, I took Why Don't You, which was a magazine programme, which used to do very well on holiday mornings and used to get like 1 million viewers. I turned it into a drama. By the end of my last episode of Why Don't You, they were fighting an evil supercomputer in the basement. And we got 3 million viewers for that. We tripled the audience. We beat This Morning.
That's it! Run for it!
And I was lucky because I worked within children's, I wrote my first script at home at night in my spare time, and I sent it to Anna Hume, who was the head of children's, but like in the internal mail. So I didn't have to go on the great big slush pile. I didn't have an agent or anything. But because I was producing for her, I went straight onto her desk. And she turned around and said, yes, we'll have that.
And that was Dark Season.
That was Dark Season, yeah. A sort of children's site, very Doctor Who-y children's
Well, I was going to say, Dark
thriller.
Season and Century Falls are both very... there is a strong connection with what you're doing now.
Yes, and they're very in the nature of those 6-part science fiction children's series, the Children of the Stones, and I used to watch when I was young, Sky, things like The Tomorrow People, Village of the Damned, all those, they're all classics really, all that sort of stuff. But I was steeped in those things because I loved them. So, yeah, it's that when you first start out, you're just copying, aren't you? I think all your career you're just copying, but you're hoping to sort of copy from the best and then make it your own if you're doing it well.
When did you think, it's an awful phrase, the voice emerging, but when did you start to think you could write?
That's tricky, isn't it? I suppose, yeah, you spend a long time worrying about that. I always thought I was good. The fact that the first thing I ever got commissioned and made was a good sign, and then you think you're lucky, and then the second thing gets made. I mean, it's job. It's like any job. It's like arrogance and insecurity 100% of the time, both running. You think you're great, you think you're rubbish, and that's what drives you on. If you keep those two fighting each other, then you'll always be inspired, I think. So I think it took good people to tell me. I worked with a producer at Granada called Tony Wood, who was the first person to sort of say, actually, you could make a living out of this. He properly turned around to me and said, you are good, you can do this. He probably doesn't even remember saying it, but he did. You work with producers and you work with script editors and you work with commissioners, and this is what no one ever understands. I mean, you write, the greatest critic is in there. It's like the one who's never happy with anything, and you get 1 million notes off 1 million people, but the greatest advances in my work, or where I've changed, where I've actually, are things that I made myself change, things that I spotted and sort of said, that's not good enough. And you just keep on doing that. On a level that goes beyond criticism.
I wondered about that because just before it all took off, which is about 10 years ago now, there were a couple of ones that didn't work, House of Windsor and Revelations. But
yes.
did you learn from those, did you?
Yes, absolutely. And I used to write in a very verbose soap opera style because all the characters are stuck in. I can pinpoint where I learned how to write in the way that I write now. Because I knew it wasn't. I was working on The Grand, actually, for ITV, which is a moderately successful series. Lovely cast, great show. But it wasn't working. I personally was getting very dissatisfied with the way I was writing and the way I was heading. And very simply, I wrote the scene in which a man calls off his engagement and he doesn't use the word engagement once, and he doesn't say it's off or it's over or I love someone else.
I wanted it to be easy. And you were there. And I needed you. needed you so much.
Of course you did.
That was what it was. I needed you.
Neither one of them says what's going on, but by the end of the scene, they're no longer engaged. And she puts the ring on the table. And I think that's where I learned to write. And I did that on my own. I just taught myself how to write that. And it was a big breakthrough.
Whereas the cliche would be give back the ring. and all
Yes,
that.
if you were looking at my career, you're going to say Queer as Folk, that changed it. That's where you wrote about gay men and therefore became yourself. Or Doctor Who, that's what you loved all your life. But actually, it comes down to a little soap opera scene that only 5 million people ever watched between two lovely little actors on a set, and that is where I learned to write.
The other thing you were able to do on the ground, which you clearly hadn't been able to do in children's television, was you could explore gay characters for the first time.
Yes. And that was, everything leads to everything else. There was, again, with the Grand, I was getting, it was a very formatted show. It was the maids in the kitchen, the guests in the bedrooms, the family who ran it upstairs. And much as I like a format and can create a format, it then starts to drive me mad. So I then did this episode that was entirely focused on Clive, played by Paul Warren, a great performance. It was the gay barman. But it wasn't just one of those heartbeat royal type tales of like, oh, here's the gay barman. It was like the entire episode was told from his point of view, told in flashback. It was proper drama. It was like really got into his head. It chucked the format out. And I did have Granada executives saying, you can't do this, and you've broken the format, and this is too radical. And you sit there going, as if I've invented the flashback. It's like, how stupid do you think the audience is? Everyone will be able to follow this. And actually, the people, the major cast players like Susan Hampshire, who only had 5 lines that week, were going, oh, this is brilliant. This is fantastic. Of course we should be doing this. So that's when I realised how stubborn I was, because they wanted me to rewrite that, and they kept calling me into Granada. I got my agent involved, and I caused so much trouble. And you begin to find out who you are. You begin to sort of think, oh, right, I'm Bolshy, and I'm trouble in his eyes, but I believe in this script, and I'm not letting anyone change it. And I honestly believe it's good. And then you reach out for friends. I got Paul Abbott to read it, saying, have I gone mad? Is this a good script? Yes, it's good, he said. So I just dug my heels in, just until it was too late. In the end, they just had to shoot it, because they were like, it was episode 12 or whatever it was of 16. And it was the best thing I'd ever written. And it was Katrina Mackenzie. She'd been instrumental in getting me to work on the ground in the first place. So as she was leaving Granada, she picked up that script and said, oh, that's better than anything you've written before. Took me out for a little cup of tea. And said, well, I'm at Channel 4 now with Gob Neal, and we want a drama about the lives of gay men, and that's exactly what Channel 4 should be doing. So off you go. That was the right place at the right time, wasn't it?
I was going to say something very similar to right place, right time. It's scary in the lives of writers, isn't it? Because that series that was so important in your career, Queer as Folk, you might never have written it if someone hadn't said,
and someone
would have.
And I honestly believe that with Queer as Folk, it was dying to be made. I mean, once it was made, you'd look at Canal Street with everything going on. You think, how could you not put a drama on Canal Street? It's begging for it.
Gay and black writers have often spoken about the burden of representation, that you're suddenly writing about a whole community.
Yes.
Did you feel that on Queer as Folk?
I did, but thank God I felt it so strongly as to ignore it. It's that when it was not commissioned, when it was mooted, I remember wandering about on Canal Street thinking, oh, got to have a lesbian character, got to have an older gay man, got to have this and that and that. Funny enough, all of whom are there as ghosts in it. There is a lesbian couple who crop up with 3 lines every week. There is old Bernie, who lives with Vince's mum, who has 2 lines every week. And they're like ghosts of the terrible drama you could have written, because they could all have demanded centre stage all the time. And it was, because again, it's like the lesson I took off the Grand was not sort of saying, oh, you're good at issues, but it was saying, look, you're good at focus. It's like the less people it's about, the more you concentrate on one character or 3 characters in the case of Queer as Folk, then the better your writing's going to be. And you could argue that those 3 characters in Queer as Folk are 3 aspects of the same person. There's one who's sexually confident, one who's sexually insecure, one who's young. That's everyone. That's all. It's like a little triptych character. And I did that on purpose. I thought that any one of us can be any one of those characters. We all can be Stuart on the right night. We're all mostly Vince. We all were Nathan. So the best thing I did was to ignore the pressure of it and the political correctness of it. It could have been. And the funny thing about Queer as Well, what everyone forgets is that while your tabloids were going, oh, blah, 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 sex and all that stuff, within the industry, within the drama industry, people were getting ready for the worst drama ever made. And Gob Neal was taken out to dinner by like Andy Harris and Kevin Lygo, television gods, you know, and like before it transmitted, and they were sniggering, sitting there going, how's your gay drama? Like it was going to be endless, boring.
Why did they think that?
Because imagine the drama it could have been. Everyone was imagining it would be men sitting in middle-class wine bars going, oh, I'm ever so worried about Roger. He's not taking his pills, you know? And it's like, oh, my heart's breaking. Des has left me. It could have been terrible. And especially since I did have a lot of soap opera background as well. That's what everyone was expecting. Really worthy, pious, sweet, cute niceness. So when that first episode hit the screen, it was just balmy. It was just brilliant. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that very much.
I interviewed Aidan Gillen recently, who was the star, and he said that he was told a story by his brother-in-law that his mother was watching the first episode, and she said, how have they done that about one of the sex scenes? And his brother-in-law said it's trick photography. But it was quite sexually explicit, wasn't it? Were you given any guidelines?
No, none at all. I mean, it's funny because I knew the guidelines because having worked in telly already. It wasn't done for shock value because it's like, you know, you're looking at rimming in that scene. That's you get television's first depiction of rimming. But actually that was really properly, carefully chosen as a sexual act outside Nathan's knowledge and actually outside his imagination. I think, you know, if you're a young teenage boy still a virgin and masturbating, just thinking about sex, I don't think that's the sex you imagine you're going to have. I don't think it's an option. So it was genuinely placed in there as a proper discovery of something new and powerful and unexpected and genuinely sensual and magnificent to him in that moment. And also, within that, I sort of knew guidelines are actually very explicit in sort of saying that you must not show genital to genital contact, which that doesn't. It's like, actually, the guidelines don't even cover it. So on another level, I knew we were completely clear. I never expected the director to actually make him do it, which was like a really powerful and brilliant director called Charles McDougall. The script is actually slightly more discreet than what we had on screen, because off they went.
So it is real, that scene?
The rimming is, yes. What a conversation to be having.
I thought it was trick photography, like Aidan Gillen's mother.
No, it's everyone's properly disinfected and health and safety and like everyone's clean. But no, that really happens. It was a wild bit of program making that with a brilliant director and quite a wild cast. You know, I mean, in terms of the risks they take and the trust they put in us as well. You know, it sounds like I'm sort of you cheapen it almost by talking about it like this because it was so much more powerful than that. Because the reasons for that sexual act were absolutely genuine.
We also see bodily fluids on screen at one point. Now, is that paste and water?
Of course it is. Oh, my God, yes, it is. And then, that's the one thing they got in trouble about, actually showing ejaculate was very much forbidden. And then Sex and the City came along and it was flying through the air. It's like, so the Americans have got a different set of standards for their cables, which Channel 4 then showed. So I never quite understood all that, but they would sit there counting the strokes at Channel 4. I went all the way as far as the Channel 4 chairman saying, you need to take out 2 seconds worth of strokes in that shot.
Really?
Yes, so we did. And actually, it sort of made the scenes more shocking. It was like because the shots all got tightened, so it sort of hit you like that, so which we liked. We're going, well, fine, if you want us to shorten it, then it's even more powerful.
A lot of writers would have kept it going for 7 series or so.
Yes.
But
what would they be doing now?
Well,
yeah, those boys.
You didn't, though. You just had that one short, I mean, effectively just a little coda.
Yes, a little wrap-up, really, yes. Which is brilliant. And it was, initially we sat there and said, off we go, let's make it every year, let's make 13 episodes. And I wrote a sort of episode 1 of a 13-part series that I don't even think I've even got the script for anymore. It was just, because we all sort of looked at it and went, there was something in the air, and Michael Jackson at Channel 4 sort of said, why are we doing what every other channel does when it's successful? By just making more. Gob Neal felt the same, and actually it was like they'd spoken a little voice at the back of my mind. That I wouldn't dare have spoken, because of course I want years of work out of them in a 13-part series and things like that. That'd be nice. So, you know, at the same time, I had so many doors opening up for me, which was brilliant. And seriously, you're always waiting to be unemployed. So part of me is thinking, well, I'll grab those chances now, because if you spend 5 years telling the lives of gay boys on Channel 4, everyone would have moved on, and other writers will be having those chances. So I was very glad to go out there and grab all the other opportunities.
The next big series was Bob and Rose, ITV.
My favourite.
It is your favourite?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I just love that. I just think I hit something in that, which is just, I just love it.
There was a bit of muttering in the gay press about that, because it's about a man who
Muttering, they were
decides-
moaning like the moaning minis that they are, which makes me equally happy. It's like, I mean, I love that. It's like you get a gay audience on your side. You've written Queer as Folk. We love you. You're the gay writer. Although most of them don't say we love you. They go, we hate you. You're the wrong gay writer. But you know, you get. And I think the most brilliant thing to do then is to you should never become a role model. You should never become a sort of leader of a parade or a beacon of anything. It's like, I was really glad to turn around and piss that audience off by writing a story of a gay man who falls in love with a woman, proving how biased a lot of those people who fought for freedom are. Because it was a true story. It literally happened to a friend of mine who works in television, and he'd fallen in love with a woman who was he was the gayest gay man you've ever met, and is still with this woman now, all these years later, still happy. But the prejudice shown against him when he did this, from me as well, I was sitting there going, oh, nervous breakdown, he's a fool, he's an idiot, he's having a midlife crisis, this is terrible. I didn't believe it until I got very drunk with him, and at 2 a.m, sat down with him and asked him every single question you ever want to ask a man in that situation. Like, how do you have sex? And what do you feel? And what drives you? And how scared are you? And he was the most brilliantly honest and passionate man, and I felt like an idiot. I went to bed that night thinking, I'm as prejudiced. How can you spend your life fighting prejudice and be prejudiced? Which, of course, is true. Everyone is. And the eye-opener of that just made me think, well, I've got to write about that. I've got to...
Was he happy that he wrote his story?
Yes. Oh my God, he's still very, very gay. Like, absolutely thrilled with it. Genuinely, I think. I had that conversation with him years before writing Bob and Rose, because it then took me a long time to fictionalise it, because I thought, I'm not portraying his life. I've got a lot to say, and it was just such a surprise to me, that series, because I did set out to writing about bigotry and prejudice and ignorance and all that sort of stuff, and found myself sort of 3 pages into episode 1 thinking, but all that prejudice and bigotry and ignorance is stupid. It's just stupid and wrong, and I can demolish that in 1 page. It's so stupid and wrong, why should I even waste my time writing about it? So suddenly I found myself with this blank canvas on which I sort of had to like pirouette madly and invent this love story, which became sort of lighter than air. I think the fact that I'd robbed it of its central theme, which is still there, it's implicit in the concept of like the freedom of a man to love whoever he wants. But once you sort of decide, I'm not going to do great big polemic speeches about this, once you decide I'm going to bring in Penelope Wilton as his mother and have a wonderful comedy with her and heartbreak with her, then it became a tremendously good-natured series, an optimistic series, and I loved it for that.
It raises the obvious question. This is where you break down and reveal your wild nights in the TARDIS with Kylie Minogue. Has it ever happened to you?
No, absolutely not. Which again is part of the reason why you write it, and even having written it and even having loved it, I still sit there going, "That'll never happen to me." Was the point of it is saying you never know who the next person is that you'll fall in love with. But it didn't persuade me, but it did open my eyes to how often it happens. Actually, the number of people you meet who say, "Oh yeah, I've done that. I was gay for 20 years," and then fell in love with a woman, and the opposite.
But the fact that you also wrote Casanova, you don't want to be stereotyped as a gay screenwriter.
No, not at all. You could argue that Casanova was as gay as a goose. At the same time, I mean, the only time the worry about being categorised as a gay writer only ever crops up in interviews. Literally in interviews on telly or in the press. It's like, I've never met a commissioner who worries about that. Not remotely. I'm sure there must be some that do it, but they're the commissioners I'm not working with because I don't want to work with them.
But I gasped on your behalf when you got Doctor Who, which we're going to talk about now. And
Did you?
Well, and in a newspaper, the implication was that Doctor Who would be gay.
Yes, that was the son, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dr. Queer, yes,
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Yes, so you just expect that, didn't you? It's like
But I thought that was pretty shocking, really.
it doesn't touch me for a second, really. I sort of laughed, if anything, and. You know, it's like, if you let that stuff into your head, what are you going to do? You're going to go balmy. But you can't let it into your head, because it's nonsense. It's like taking a nursery rhyme seriously.
And the fact that we're sitting in the TARDIS now is because someone somewhere had the idea It's amazing, isn't it? All
It's
these
a beautiful
little
thing.
bits of car radio
It's
and
like my 500th
old
time
computer.
on it, I still think it's beautiful.
Well, it's my
Make it-
first,
make
but
it sound
it
hollow.
is amazing. But all of this is yours because someone somewhere thought, let's get him to revive Doctor Who. But
Yes.
how did it come, the approach?
It was from Lorraine Hegarty and Jane Tranter.
Who were head of BBC One and head of
was
drama at the
Head
time.
of drama.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had been nagging for years. Not nagging, but like whenever I met Jane Tranter, I'd written Linda, one episode of Paul Abbott's Linda Green. And whenever I meet her, I'd say, oh, I want to do Doctor Who. So they didn't bring it back
right.
because I'd been nagging. But when they decided to bring it back, my name was associated with it. It was automatically like, oh, Russell Davies wants to do that. And we want to work with Russell Davies. So,
But you had for a long time thought it should be brought back.
But you know, probably not. If I'm absolutely honest, I thought they'd never bring it back. And I thought, as a genuine fan of it, it was my job in meeting the head of drama to say that someone should bring it back because they might do one day, and it'd probably be on BBC Three and be a disaster. But so I was never that serious about it, to be honest, because I honestly thought it had had its day.
Well, I was going to say, but it's important to remind people now with this whole enterprise around us that it was a bad joke at that time, Doctor Who, wasn't it? I mean, people thought it was rubbish. Yeah.
Yes, its memory had just degraded over the years, and it was. You forget that in the 60s of Dalek Mania, it was a massive programme. It was a huge, and then during Tom Baker's reign. And I think I honestly watched every single episode and always liked it in every form of Doctor. But it's hard, isn't it? Because it just television tradition left it behind. Those three-walled proscenium arch sets with the lighting and the budget that they had. And plus people make a joke of science fiction anyway. They do it with this nice expensive version. So it was ripe to be mocked, I'm afraid.
And the key thing which started your rise to being the 15th most powerful man in British television was that you would be executive producer. You would be, in that American phrase we used earlier,
Yes.
the showrunner. What was that crucial to you that you had to
It
have
was,
that?
and also with science fiction more than anything else, because I do watch an awful. I like television science fiction, film science fiction, and I think, in my opinion, I know a lot about it. And I mean, even in terms of like colours and things like that, it's like wherever I can, I've banned gold and silver. Because that's just rubbish science fiction. If people walk onto a television set, and
Because
gold
you
and
think
silver,
tinfoil.
it's larvae.
Yeah.
It's rubbish. It's the rubbish end of it. Where I learned about show running was actually on The Second Coming, which had lonely people in it who, in that context, were devils, and people were revealed as devils in The Second Coming by having a shining light in their eye. And it's a very, very subtle, small CGI effect of lights in people's eyes. And that's how it was described in the script. It's with the Mark Benton character, it's as tiny pinpoints of white light in their eyes. Now, everyone read that script. Everyone, brilliant people read that script. Like Nicholas Schindler, Nick Elliott read that script, and they all put it down and they said, right, how are we going to do the red eyes? Because they were devils. It did not say red eyes anywhere in the script, and everywhere was, and even the special effects people came in and like, oh, right, what do you want then? Green cat's eyes, lizard eyes? You go, no, I said tiny pinpoint. And it's something about science fiction and fantasy where people think they have carte blanche to go anywhere, and that's where it needs controlling more than anything else.
You mentioned earlier the assumption before Queer as Folk began that it was going to be rubbish. History repeats itself. I remember people at the BBC who wanted the jobs of Jane Tranter and Lorraine Hegarty. They assumed this was going to bring them down, this mad folly of bringing back
Did they? Was
Doctor
it that
Who.
bad?
Yeah,
Oh,
there was a lot of assumption that it was going to be a complete disaster. Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't actually. I sort of knew. Of course, I knew that people were expecting it to fail because that's what people are like. That happens, and you're aware of disasters of the past, like bringing back Crossroads and things like that. So it was sort of natural. I always knew it would work. Or I never knew it would work to this extent. I mean, I have to say the success of it has gobsmacked all of us. You wouldn't dream of this. It's just insane. But I knew as a drama it worked, and I knew it was. If we'd only made that first series, and if no one had watched that first series, look at that first series, it was good, and it was honest, it was heartfelt. So no matter what the reaction would have been, I knew we were making a good piece of work.
You got me very funny. Right, I've got the joke. Whose idea was this? Is it Derek's? Is it? Derek, is this you?
on.
When I grew up watching Doctor Who, the episodes I always most liked were the ones that were set in a recognisable
Yes.
planet Earth, England.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that first episode and thinking, great, it starts in a department store.
Yes.
But that was a policy decision.
Very deliberate. We still go less to alien planets. Even when we do go to alien planets, I tend to like it set in a space station that feels like a factory or an office or a place of work or a soldier's domain, rather than I think only cinema can truly afford massive, great big alien landscapes in Star Wars films, and even the most expensive. If you watch Heroes at the moment, they've just gone off to feudal Japan for 6 episodes. It's terrible. It's Orange County. You just sit there going, that's not feudal Japan. You've just gone into your backyard with a great big budget, and it doesn't work. And I gather they themselves are like sitting there going, it can't work. With the most expensive television budget, it looks like nonsense to go into a field or a quarry and sail on an alien planet. It's science fiction at its worst. It's science fiction that's ready for people to take the piss out of it.
When Doctor Who started, or restarted in this case, it was that time when the drama departments were very into focus groups. 20 people in Wolverhampton sitting around saying whether they would watch this series. Did you have any of that on
Absolutely none of it. None. I was just trusted. The funny thing is, I'd been a focus group for 40 years. I'd watched all the history of Doctor Who. The funny thing is about Doctor Who, created by focus groups. Sidney Newman in 1963, when you look at the files, they did endless research to design a programme that fitted between Grandstand and Jukebox Jury. And it's infinite amounts of research saying it should have an older character, it should have a younger character for the kids, it should have a woman for the men to watch and a man for the women to watch. It should be educational, it should change format every so often. It's entirely constructed by focus groups, which gives the lie to how bad they are.
Yeah.
It's all there in the documentation. It really was. Then it had genius added into it. But this is why I could not be happier in this job. I am so trusted.
One of the key decisions you made was the central casting. With all due respect to Peter Davison, Tom Baker, you've brought in the kind of people, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, who will play Edward II for the Royal Shakespeare Company, Hamlet, as David Tennant is about to for the Royal Shakespeare Company. Yeah. That was policy.
Yes, absolutely. Because at the time we're reaching out, asked Penelope Wilton to come and be in it, Simon Callow. They don't know, that first raft of guest stars we're enormously indebted to, because now I think people know they'll come and have a good time and they'll come and get a good script. They were flying into the dark, really. It could have been nonsense. So casting Chris was a very, very big signpost in sort of saying, actually, this isn't the old nonsense that you might imagine it was, even though it wasn't, but that we're serious, that this is proper drama, proper scripts. And it worked. It absolutely worked.
Did you always know that Eccleston would only do one series?
That was the plan, and with David following on. Well, the funny thing is, we never imagined we'd get a second series. You forget that. It now looks such...
Oh, what, you even knew that David Tennant would take over?
No, we didn't know that.
Right,
No. But we started planning ahead for that, obviously. But it's funny looking back, because I think partly a lot of us thought there'd just be one series. It's like, you couldn't have imagined this. And they put us up against Ant and Dec on a Saturday night, and as you said, and there's no science fiction in prime time. It was dead as a genre. It was only existed in subscription slots and things like that. So all of us flying into the dark, none of us expecting that.
So at those early press conferences and things, you had to do a certain amount of misleading the public, as they say.
I'm always doing that. Never think I tell the truth in an interview. It is, and even now, it's the whole. I think it's one of the fascinating things about playing this program as a game, which is that it has a ferocious amount of attention, partly from that very small number of fans, but actually, from the tabloids, and I just. It's very fascinating living in a post-Hutton BBC where you're not allowed to lie. Because this literally was post-Hutton, where and your bosses in drama have a terrible responsibility to never lie to a journalist's question. That's policy, and that's absolutely admirable. But it's rubbish when it comes to drama. It's like, is so-and-so leaving? And I lie through my teeth. I'll sit here and say the Daleks aren't coming back, the Master's never coming back. That's my job. So when it comes back, it's a surprise. And then if fans know when you're lying, then so it all becomes a sort of nice game, I think, of like, if you're really listening to every word I say, then you can start to read between the lines. God help if you are. But, it's like, it's a game. It's a fantastic game. It's a big media game.
But do you know how long you've got David Tennant for?
Yes, we do.
So you know his leaving date?
I suppose, yes. Or... Oh, you see, you've lulled me into a false sense of security, and I know my leaving date as well.
2009 is what people say for both of you.
Fascinating.
But you know what you're going to do in 2010?
Yes, I do.
And it won't be Doctor Who.
It might be. It's far more complicated than you think, actually. It will be in all sorts of shapes and forms.
It will be a Doctor Who movie.
That would be nice. I don't know, do you think the world's ready for that?
And Doctor Who, for all the power you have here, it wasn't your creation. The spin-offs, Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, was that a way of making it more yours?
Oh, no. It was simply to get more product. I'm going to say product now, but it's like the joy of coming here was to have a very brilliant casts and crews in South Wales, a lot of whom have been working for many years on a lot of Welsh language stuff, but which is brilliant stuff, but isn't seen on the networks. And so you come here and you realise it's a powerhouse, it's a creative powerhouse, and stuff isn't seen here. I mean, Wales simply wasn't known for its drama output at all. So it was simply a way of expanding the empire, literally of expanding. I mean, it's no good having one hit show. It's no good. That's not a foundation of nothing. Because if you've got one show, the moment that show ends, everything's gone. Everything's out of work. And when you see what the crews can do here and the design teams and the level of expertise, you sort of think, well, it's stupid to make one show. You should build, because we originally had a much smaller studio. We only got this space because we got 3 shows running at once. Once we got this space, it's a dedicated space. And you're likely that with a dedicated space, if those 3 shows are suddenly axed by some mad controller, they'll have to get other shows into film. It's work. It's the business side of it. It's also a very good imaginative plan, because you'd watch the Star Trek franchises expanding, and I think they always made a mistake because all their shows are the same. And this is very carefully designed as Doctor Who in the middle as a family show, Sarah Jane for children, Torchwood for adults. They're very, very different shows, all nonetheless feeding into each other in a very sort of complicated way, actually. And I think even the children's audience likes that complication. Look at the Harry Potter backstory and stuff like that, and the more detailed you make Hogwarts and the more complex, the more they love it, the more they get into it. Kids love that sort of level of detail. So it's a chance to sort of complicate the mythological world of Doctor Who without making Doctor Who itself too complicated.
Last 40 years, Doctor Who has come and gone in the schedules, as we've talked about. How long can it go on now, do you think?
Well, I think forever now. I think really, I'm sure it'll have pauses, like we're doing a pause in 2009. I think it's now worked many times. It worked in the 60s, it worked in the 70s with Tom Baker, and I think we've just shown that now, and this success is huge, and you'd be mad if you're not sitting there in 40 years' time going, let's do that show again, let's do it in 3D holovision. But they will. It's properly become now, and always was, I think, but I think this incarnation is just a chance to prove it. It's Robin Hood, it's Tarzan, it's Sherlock Holmes, it's a great British character who will never die, never.
According to the websites, what he will write next is a big gay drama.
Big gay drama, let's just call it that. Big gay drama. It is, I'm dying to go back to Red in Manchester and work with Nicola Schindler, and soon it's going to be 10 years since I wrote Queer as Folk, and things have changed, and marvellously things are exactly the same as well. So there's a lot of sort of gay things I keep thinking about that will make a good drama, but it's not a word as written,
But it will be a sort of Queer as Folk 3.
Yes. Who knows? I don't know what it's like. I mean, at this stage, before Queer as Folk, I couldn't have told you what it was going to be about, so I keep on throwing out theories in interviews, saying what it might be about, just to see what it sounds like when I read it back. And then the other day I sort of said, well, it might be about 40-year-old gay men, and I read that back in the interview. Well, that's boring, isn't it? What's that? They were sitting having a cup of tea, reading a book. I don't know. I've got no idea. Something in that area, but also something domestic. It's like something which people can swear, something which people have sex, actually, because I love Doctor Who, and there are whole worlds of experience closed off from it that must be closed off from it just naturally. So it's just to write a scene of 2 people arguing in a kitchen, that would be a glorious thing. I would love that. So it's time to go back there as well.
Finally, just to settle all the speculation on the internet, is Doctor Who gay?
No, he's not. It's about a man who travels with them, much as I'd love him to be. He's very gay friendly. But Mark Lawson, where are you from? The Sun? It's I expected class on BBC4, and I get his Doctor Who gay. I'm ashamed.
Russell Davies, thank you very much.
Thank you. You terrible man. Where's the applause?
Thank you very much.
I'm joking. They do. See the power I have here?
You have. It's awesome.